Anyway, this time I said, all right, you got to be a paying subscriber on the Substack page, arielhelwani.substack.com. We're building it up to ask a question. I see that I have a bunch here. And so let's answer some before we call it a week. How about that? Next week, going to be a fun one with Darren Till versus Derek Brunson. There's going to be so much to discuss coming off the big weekend. So the train shall roll on. I'll actually be flying in from Cleveland Monday morning and coming straight here because it's a Sunday card. So that's going to be very interesting. All right, let's see what we got here. With UFC, this is from Jake Olinar. When with UFC Fight Pass having a lack of care for their library, losing what is one of their best promotions in Invicta, cancellations that often mean no exclusive prelims, and just going on ESPN Plus, I feel like the value of Fight Pass is significantly decreasing. Do you agree? I mean, there's a lot of MMA out there. There's UFC on ESPN, which is pretty much every weekend. Now they're putting Contender Series. Now they're putting Tough. There's Bellator on Showtime. There's PFL on ESPN. There's LFA on Access. There's Invicta on Access and pay-per-view. There's Cage Warriors on Fight Pass. There's just a lot. Clearly, you're an American, because ESPN Plus is only in America. And so overseas, I would imagine there's still a lot of value because I know some of the cards are on Fight Pass. Kind of reminds me a little bit of the WWE network. They made the deal with Peacock in the States, but if you're in Canada or elsewhere, you still need it. And so I'm not going to advocate to cancel it. Yeah, if you're living in America and you're subbing to Plus and the pay-per-views and Showtime and all that, like, you're probably getting your fix, and you got Access TV as well. Actually, LFA is on Fight Pass. They used to be on Access TV. My apologies. You're probably getting enough. I mean, with UFC on every single weekend other than 9 weekends out of the year, and then you've got Bellator and PFL, that alone is probably enough for you. But I'm not one who actively goes back and watches some of the old fights. I mean, they've done some good original programming. I'll give them that. And I think that's going to be ultimately a huge thing for them as well. And the library's good. I mean, look what happened with WWE Network. There is a way to package this off and sell it and do it in a big way. Now, obviously, WWE Network was its own standalone thing, and they had the pay-per-views there exclusively. ESPN Plus has the pay-per-views, so it's a little different, but it's a moneymaker, and the numbers are up, and they've talked about it. So probably if you're overseas, it's of greater value. When it comes, this is from L. Gilmore. When it comes to fighters' pay, we've seen some attempts at collectives coming together with the intention of tackling the subject. GSP was a high-profile member of the MMAAA, which lasted, 7 days? These groups, that was my own commentary, these groups just seem to whimper away and die. What do you think stops any momentum or movement created by these groups? Are they scared off? All but slowly, any fighter standing up for the cause distance themselves, and you never hear from it again. Okay, there's a few things here. Number one, the MMAAA came out with Bjorn Rebney, which was a horrible decision, the worst guy possible to put in that spot. Let's just call it like it is. He was the worst choice possible. He was a guy who was not known to be, I have nothing against Bjorn, but he was not known to be fighter friendly. And there he is standing next to those fighters. It felt disingenuous. It felt fake. It felt inauthentic. It felt like he was just trying to, all of a sudden he's going to stick up for the fighters. He was on the other side. He was part of the problem. Not happening. Big names, biggest names possible. It was GSP and Cain Velasquez and Donald Cerrone and TJ Dillashaw. A lot of those guys were CAA guys, so it felt like it was like CAA versus UFC, which kind of Cerrone wasn't. So muddied the waters a little bit. The problem was it lost momentum after one day. Literally after one day, I remember they announced it. End of the year was like December. The next week was UFC in Toronto. And Cerrone's like, nah, I didn't know what I was getting into. Oh, Tim Kennedy was a part of it as well. I don't know what and you already have a guy who's saying, on second thought, I don't know if I'm going to be a part of this. The whole thing had no legs. And so what I wrote about yesterday was there needs to be a collective voice. There needs to be a unified front. they need to have a seat at the table. And by the way, if they have the seat at the table and if they have the collective voice and it leads to them getting the amount that they're getting now, the 18%, and they're all happy, then God bless. But the whole point of revenue sharing and collective bargaining is that you are able to say collectively what you want, negotiate, as opposed to saying, hey, no sponsors, here's your deal. Hey, 24/7 drug testing, here are the, it's just not the way. Oh, hey, here's a crypto company that we're going to put on the uniform. You're not getting a penny. Hey, here's a new TV deal. You're not but ultimately, I'll just say it feels like it's the media and some of the fans who complain about this or talk about this or bring light to this more than the fighters. Now, of course, I'm not a dummy. I understand you work for the promotion, not just the UFC, but any promotion. Bellator, I'm sure Bellator fighters, PF, no one's happy, but you're not going to talk about it because you're under contract. I get it. You don't want to rock the boat. And the thing that has always been the issue is, all right, you've got almost like 3 or 4 tiers. You've got the top 1% who are living large, who are so far removed from everything else, they're not going to screw things up at this point. You've got the guys who are the champions, who are just starting to make the money, and they're like, I worked my ass off to get here. I'm not going to rock the boat. You have a guy who's a contender who feels like he's on the cusp of making the money. I'm not going to rock the boat. And then you got the 10,000 guys who are like, I'm here. I'm sure as hell not. And so no one wants to rock the boat. No one wants to speak up. So there is no collective voice. Now, there was something called the PFA. They had Jeff Boris, longtime baseball guy, agent, showed up to McGregor Diaz 2 with a shirt and the logo. No one got behind it because there was no there was no momentum. It's very tough. You don't want to be blackballed. And every guy who asked spoke about it publicly eventually does get the pink slip. Now, I know what's going to happen now. The MMAFA and their fighters are going to come at me and say, you don't talk about us. First of all, I talk about this ad nauseam. I've lost jobs because I've talked about this, and it doesn't even affect me. But as I said to Cajun Johnson yesterday on my Instagram, who kind of came at me and was like, well, we have an organization. We have a collective voice. How many members of your team are on the UFC roster? The voice means nothing. We're talking about a UFC thing here. It's great what you're doing. The class action laws, God bless. I hope it all works out. And it's a worthy cause. But that's not what I'm talking about right now. Those fighters aren't subjected to the uniform deal or the TV deal, the money. It's almost 2 totally different things. Of course, it's a Venn diagram and there's the middle. But you get what I'm saying. I'm talking about the guys who are under contract. If there was some sort of system where if you fought 8 times, you'll be subjected to this pension. And there's so much. That's why I always compare this sport to the leather helmet days. That's honestly why I love covering this sport. That's why I love being back here to where I can talk about these things. And I love MMA. Like I said, I've devoted my life to MMA. It's all I talk about. It's all I think about. It's all I read about. It's probably a little bit too crazy how much I think about this crazy sport. But then when you hear Jared Cannonier or Miesha Tate deserves more than $200,000. Are we kidding ourselves? Come on. When you hear them talk about it, when you know how the sausage is made, it's a little disheartening. The fighters deserve more. I don't know how anyone can sit here with a straight face, honestly, and say that they are getting what they are owed, what they are deserving of. 18%, 19%, 20%. It needs to be in the 40s and 50s. And I know it's not as clean, and I know it's not as simple as other sports. I'm not trying to pick a fight. I just feel like people need to know that your favorite fighter isn't walking away with all that much, or at the very least, their fair share. Seat at the table, voice, that's all. But it's tough. It's tough. It might be, I don't think it's happening anytime soon, and I'm not trying to rag on the fighters for that either. I get why it's not happening. It's tough to be that one guy. It's tough to, be Kurt Flood and potentially ruin your career. It is very tough. It's not an easy thing. I can sit here all day long and say, I get it. It's super, super tough. That doesn't mean it shouldn't happen. That doesn't mean it won't happen. That doesn't mean it doesn't need to happen. It's tough. I get it. We'll be talking about this. It seems like more people are talking about it, but does anything ultimately happen? Not really. Not right now. Have you ever played Dungeons and Dragons? If so, or even if you haven't, what kind of character would you play as in a fantasy world with elves, Wizards, Dragons. This is from Chris Gardner. Well, I think I played Dungeons and Dragons when I was a little kid. Never was into that fantasy stuff. Never got into Pokemon. Never got into Magic cards. I'm a man's man. No, it's just, honestly, I loved wrestling. So you can say what you want about that. Alistair, how dare you? No, Dungeons and Dragons never was my thing. If I had to pick one, probably a dragon. I mean, I feel like the dragon is better than the wizard and the elf, but I don't know. I don't really know if the dragons are not as strong, have weaknesses. This is from David. What do you make of Eddie Hearn's ambition to make matchroom boxing more like the UFC with greater control over the fighter so he can make more elite matchups? The trade-off between fighter pay against seeing the best versus the best matchup is an interesting debate. You rarely and frequently see best versus best in boxing, but pay is better. You could definitely see that Eddie Hearn is trying to make it more like a UFC. That's better for the fan. I think the event this weekend feels more like a UFC event. That, you know, that's a proven commodity. There's a blueprint there. I definitely think that if you are a promoter who's trying to solely make it like the UFC, you're not going to be successful. Witness the fact that Zuffa boxing was never a thing, never became a thing. I told you it wasn't going to become a thing because no one's going to let someone come in there and control the way the UFC is able to control MMA because they were the leader. They were there first. That ship has already, it will take years to change the model that is boxing. And yeah, you're right. They do make more. They have more power. They have more leverage. They have more freedom. But it's splintered. So that's why I say I get why fans want everyone under one umbrella. Pro wrestling is a lot more like MMA. There's the dominant, brand, then there's the other brands, a lot more like MMA. They also don't have any representation, any collective voice, which I think they should. I'm all about, listen, you want to accuse me of being biased? The only thing you can truly accuse me of is I want the fighters to get paid as much as possible and get paid more. But by the way, I just want to say, Jake Paul, again, as I was saying last show, I mean, he's turned into a babyface. This guy is getting fighters paid more. He's elevating other fighters. He's giving female fighters a platform. I mean, it's hard to hate him right now. He's confusing the public. I can see it. He's confusing them. He's got the whole world eating out of his hand. And I made the comparison to Andy Kaufman. And of course, Andy Kaufman is a legend. But I made the comparison to Andy Kaufman because Andy Kaufman picked a fight with an industry. And that's what Jake Paul is doing. What he's doing is so smart. First, he went after the fellow YouTuber. Check. Then he went after the NBA and you had Steph Curry and LeBron tweeting about it. Check. Then it's like, oh, I could go after an entire sport. The media is going to cover me more. The fans are going to talk about me more. I could pluck these guys out who don't know how to box as well as I do, who are older than I am, and I could pick a fight with those guys and their leader and the faces of their organization. Check Askren. We'll see on Sunday how it pans out against Tyron Woodley. Oh, and then I'm going to go for Tommy Fury potentially and pick a fight with the Fury family and go back to the boxing community. Like, the MMA community is covering this more than the boxing community. And that's brilliant because, again, the MMA community and the MMA media core stronger, in my opinion, right now than the boxing media core. And I'm not trying to pick a fight. It's just the way it is. I was at ESPN for 3 years. 2 out of those years, there was no one covering boxing full time. There's not as much talent out there, at least that I've seen. There's some great guys coming up. Karim Bhatia, great guy. My man Dan over at CompuBox, great guy. A lot of great guys who deserve opportunities. Canobio. But what he's doing is brilliant. It's like Andy Kaufman. He's picking a fight. They're all talking about it. They're all getting riled up. And like Sunday feels like an MMA event, if you ask me. Oh, and they got that. They got the nose involved. Damn. What would cause you, this is from Matt. Oh, Matt. Oh, before I get to the other, the two Matts. What would your nickname be if you were a fighter/wrestler? Well, my nickname when I started out in this business, as they say in the pro wrestling business, was the franchise. I worked on a radio show called In the Ring on CFMB 1280 AM in Montreal. And the host of the show was a guy named Aaron Amadeus. And he said, "You're the franchise because you're the future." Now, this is the year 2000. I was 18, 17, turning 18. And so I've always said that if I fought, I'd be the franchise. This is from another Matt. Shout out to Shane Douglas, by the way, the franchise. What would cause you to turn your back on MMA? The long-term health impact on fighters, as exemplified by this year's Spencer Fisher story. Great job by Stephen Morocco here at MMA Fighting. Heartbreaking story, but great reporting. And the ongoing fighter pay issues make me feel pretty complicit in exploiting these athletes I root for. If more stories about the fighters who brought me into the sport start to emerge, I think I'll have to stop being a fan, right? Or am I being over the top? And the fact that fighters choose this lifestyle makes it just okay enough for all of us to keep watching. So this is sort of like what I was talking about when you know how the sausage is made. It's tough. Ultimately, why am I still doing this? I started really in 2006 doing this for a living. Why am I still doing this? And I can't believe it's been 15 years. I do it for the fighters. Now, I don't feel like I'm doing it for the fighters. What I mean is talking to them, learning more about them, the Brendan Loughnane, the Kevin Hunt, like those stories and how accessible they are, how open they are, how vulnerable they are at times. I love that. You don't get that in any other sport. You can't even get a show like this in any other sport. There is no show like this in any other sport. Show me one. Name one. Name one where you get these names on in their respective sport, each and every show. Doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. And so that's why I still love it. I like the fighters more than the fights. Of course I love the fights, but it's like what keeps me going in my heart, what makes me want to get a new job doing this, that. It's the fighters. That excites me, talking to them, interviewing them. If I could do that for the rest of my days. But I won't lie to you. Like I've read about Howard Cosell towards the end of his days. Howard Cosell hated boxing, turned on boxing, felt like it ruined his friend's life, Muhammad Ali. And now as we're getting older and we're seeing the guys that we grew up with, the guys who helped us fall in love with the sport, the Spencer Fishers, those great fights with Sam Stout, Chuck Liddell, BJ Penn, and you're starting to see those guys and the state that they're in and what they've been left with. That's why I talk about fighter pay now. That's why I talk about them getting what they're owed now. I hate to be a broken record here, but that's why. Because the window is so small and because they're left with nothing. So I get it. I get feeling weird. I would say still support them. The bigger the sport gets, the more money that they'll get as well eventually, we hope. And it's okay to have mixed feelings, but they're great people and they deserve our support. What's the greatest risk you've taken in your career? This is from Brodo. And by the way, I love these questions. These are great questions. Greatest risk I've taken in my career. Man, probably the greatest risk that I've taken thus far in my career was I worked to get a job at Spike TV. And this is 2007. I was working in TV production. They were the home of the UFC, and I thought this is the perfect place for me. Production, UFC, that stuff all together. And then I get there. I'm there 1 week. I went to Las Vegas. Dean Thomas was fighting Kenny Florian, I believe. And we did absolutely nothing. And I realized after a week, this isn't the job for me. There's nothing for me to do. And so I walked into my boss's office, Brian Diamond, and I said, this job isn't for me. I'm really sorry, but I would like to leave. And he told me that this was the biggest mistake of my life and that I would regret it forever and that I was unprofessional and that this wasn't the way business was conducted. But I knew in my heart this wasn't the job for me. And so they made me stick around for a month and a half till they found someone to replace me. And that's when I started my site, jerrypark.com. And that's when I started reaching out to fighters on MySpace. And that's when I started interviewing them because I realized that's the crossroads of my life. 25, I got to go for this. I got to interview fighters. I want to cover this sport. 2007, 2008, it's growing. It's getting interesting. UFC, Elite XC, IFL, Strikeforce. And it was a risk. I gave myself 6 months. I said from October to April 1st. If I don't get a job in that 6-month period, I'll go back to TV production. And luckily, with 3 days left, it's kind of crazy. My wife is actually calling me right now on FaceTime with 3 days left on my deadline, with 3 days left on her birthday, no less. I got a job at MMA Rated. And so that was a big risk. In that period, I actually got engaged to my wife. In that period, I had nothing. I had no job. I had no income. But I wanted to take a chance. Thank the good Lord, it all panned out. L. Gilmore, you mentioned that Brock is the most intimidating individual you've ever had to interview. What fighter or personality completely exceeded or surpassed any expectation you had of them prior to meeting and interviewing them? Your infamous interview with The Undertaker at UFC 121 is one I can think of where viewers got to see the man behind the persona. All right, so there's a ton here because I've obviously had the good fortune to interview a ton. The first one that just came to mind now, back in the old days, the Bryant Park days of this show, the MMA Hour, Stone Cold Steve Austin came in studio. Now, I know he's not a fighter, but it's just the first one that came to mind. In studio, and I couldn't believe how down-to-earth he was, how humble he was. He came alone. He came early. He was very gracious with his time. It was an absolute joy. So that's one that was like, wow. The Rock also. I mean, honestly, you meet most of them, like they're all really good, kind, down-to-earth people. There are very few a-holes. There are very few bad guys. There are very few mean guys. There are very few rude guys or gals. So I've never really had, sometimes you walk away and you're like, that wasn't great. But for the most part, witness the fact that I'm still around 15 years later. They've been all great and very enjoyable. Back in your life, this is Mike. From the sounds of it, with Gable Steveson, the UFC hasn't been out front trying to secure him. Do you have any thoughts on that? Coming off an Olympic gold medal, win like his, and the popularity he's been gaining, this would be a huge get for the UFC in the heavyweight division. Wouldn't he be easier to negotiate with now before he goes to WWE or another organization and becomes a bigger star? Keep up the awesome work. Thank you. UFC ain't going to be chasing him. They're not going to play that game. Honestly, if I'm Bellator, I get him under the same kind of deal that they had with Aaron Pico. Let him go wrestle, pay him a little stipend, and you secure the fact that when he is ready, he comes over to you. You put him in your system, your farm system, if you will. I would do that. But it sounds to me like the picture with Vince ain't taking a picture with you if you're not coming over. That's just my read on the situation. No inside knowledge there. Just my read. Dana's not meeting with him. I mean, it just feels like it's right there. He's front and center. He's in the ring, like they're rolling out the red carpet for him. And so I feel like he's going to go there. But if I'm Bellator, I try to get him in the farm system like I did with Pico. And I know the Pico thing didn't really work out. UFC has done some developmental deals, but not to the point of, paying a guy like that who hasn't fought. Bellator has. So I would consider that. But I'm not surprised they're not going after him. It's not really their thing. Their thing is get a few fights and then come to us. Jake, Ariel, which is the best regional MMA territory to check out right now in the United States? Mine is CFFC. Great one. That is a good one. Ring of Combat, another one. Cage Warriors has made its debut, but they're obviously not known as an American promotion, mainly in Europe. KSW, Europe, USA. LFA, of course, probably the one that has produced the most stars to come over to the UFC. Invicta, you'd have to put them in that bucket right now. Those are probably the ones. Ariel, in 5 years, where do you see MMA and how about 10? The sport is trending in the right direction. With the rise of gambling, with the rise of ESPN, their notoriety on ESPN, and these other promotions, like it is trending in the right direction. Make no mistake about it. We could talk all we want about the lack of stars and this guy losing and that person losing. Sports gambling being legal all over the place is huge for the UFC, huge for MMA. All of these sports books, gigantic. DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, Caesars, all these places. It's great. It's a great sport to bet on. It's a very easy sport. Every Saturday, you pick your fighters, your parlays, all that. It's been huge for it. ESPN, huge for it. Showtime getting back, huge for it. So I think the sport is going to be in a big spot. Honestly, the biggest story to watch over the next few years is this whole fighter pay thing. Like, does anything change? Are we going to see co-promotions and all that? Probably not. Not going to happen. But that to me is the one to watch. Now, I've often said we're maybe 20, 30 years from it really changing. As depressing as that sounds, maybe I'm being way too conservative. Maybe it's 5, 10 years. Josh, I saw a lot of WWE coverage this weekend. Are we going to get any AEW coverage on these feeds? CM Punk, CM Punk, CM Punk. This is what he wrote. I did reach out to CM Punk, and he said he was laying low with the media stuff. So, of course, I would love to have him on. But he's laying low with the media stuff, and I thought his promo was great and totally respect that. He was very nice about it all, and I'm rooting for those guys. I hope that I want everyone to succeed. Rising tide lifts all boats. Look at the late 90s, WCW, WWF, better. And I hope we can get that sort of thing in MMA. Troy Farkas, my old producer, TST, on the page. How about that? Who should Jake Paul fight if he beats Woodley? Tommy Fury. If Tommy Fury beats Anthony Taylor, which a lot of people think he will, got to be Tommy Fury. It's right there. It's right there. Honestly, it's right there. It's the great storyline. He'll be on the same card. The stars are aligning. It's the Furies. It's a boxer. Not that many fights. He'll have 7 fights. That's the one. Same size. He's got the social media following. My sister said she loved him on Love Island with Miss Molly May, all that thing. You got John Fury involved. You got Tyson Fury involved. You got the Pauls who can promote better than anyone. That's the one. Now, if he loses, it gets a little weird. But I would like to see a non-MMA fight. There's only one. It's Tommy Fury. With John Jones taking what is likely going to end up being a 2+ year hiatus, do you still believe that he is the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, or do you think it should be relinquished to Kamaru Usman? I think Usman should get it. Now that Khabib is gone, it should be Usman. He has been the most active. I thought John lost to Dominic Reyes, even though you want to give him the win. Like, you don't fight for a year. I've always said, tough to be ranked. I hope we see him back. These are important years, important days. Hope to see him back, but I would go probably Usman Izzy right now is 1-2. Any chance of you interacting with Luke Thomas this week with you both working with Jake Paul and Woodley, or the Jake Paul Woodley fight? Would be great to see you guys bury the hatchet. No hatchet here. I don't know if he's going to be there. I don't know what his duties are, but I would shake his hand. No hard feelings here. Said some things about me. I don't care. Life is too short for any of that. So no hard feelings here, and I got no hatchet here. No hatchet to bury, of course. Christopher, as I was reading your latest Nose article, it dawned on me, when are you going to start writing your autobiography? Can't wait to read it. Highway to Helwani, coming soon. Barnes Noble. I need to start working on that. Boy, do I got a lot to talk about. A lot of stuff that I haven't told you all about, and I feel like I've told you a lot. And a friend of mine keeps telling me I need to start writing things down, voice notes, all this stuff. I haven't gone there yet, but I probably should. Before it's all said and done, I want to do it. Highway to Helwani. Is that the right name? I don't know, but it's the name that always comes to mind. Matthew, what do you regret the most in your career? Tough question. Kind of falls into the Highway Helwani thing. Really only one answer, and I've talked about it, the Fox thing. Getting paid by UFC, biggest regret of my career. It's the only regret that I have, really. Every move, every zig, every zag, I can live with them all. I knew in my heart I shouldn't have done it. I fought it. I lost. I still did it. I should have followed my heart. I should have listened to myself. Easy to say now. It was a big opportunity, 5 years there on TV, but I just never, ever, ever, ever felt comfortable with it. I went to Syracuse University, the best damn journalism school in the country, and that was day one stuff. And I will regret that for the rest of my life. And I justified it by saying, oh, the money's coming from Fox and family and all that. I just should have stayed away. As we just passed the 5-year anniversary of the UFC, this is from Varine, just a couple more here. Under the WME IMG regime, how would you grade WME IMG as stewards of the sport? And how will history view the decision by the Fertitus to sell the UFC in 2016, given the new heights the company reached with ESPN post-sale? It's fine. They're shrewd. They're smart. More ads than ever on the mat, and they've made some business decisions, and they've benefited from the pandemic and having the events at Apex. That was a very smart move. That was started by the old regime. Cut costs, made a lot of money. The one thing I'll say is they always told us back in the day, it'll never be like boxing. It'll never be just one fight and a bunch of other fights. And the cards are feeling more and more like the boxing cards that they used to criticize, they being the old brass. But things have changed. I mean, a lot of these cards are quite thin, and it's not, it used to be UFC is on, I'm coming over. Now it's UFC is on, who's fighting? Well, I'll just wait for next week. But they're making hand over fist. The relationships with all the TV partners are great. And so who can honestly criticize them? But yeah, it's different. It's a different organization. It's a different sport. It's a different model. What is your top 5 pound for pound OAT? I don't know if that's a troll. Is that GOAT? Did he mean to write Geo? Anderson? Okay, well, there's two lists. There's the PD list and the non-PD list. And what I mean by that is, like, did they fail ever in their career? Then they can't be on the non-PD list. If it's the non-PD list, it's GSP, it's Demetrius Johnson, it's Daniel Cormier, it's Fedor. Who am I missing? If it's the other one, it's those guys, but it's also John Jones, it's Anderson Silva. Those are the names. Greatest of all time, in my opinion, is Georges St-Pierre. Because he never failed, because he avenged his 2 losses. All right, one more. Let's see here. Okay, here it is. What fighter do you think you have the greatest chance beating in a 3-round fight? Are you kidding me? I can't beat any of these people. They're unbelievable athletes. They possess DNA that I can't even dream of possessing. Can't even dream of possessing. Stepping in a cage, naked, essentially, with just shorts, a cup, 4-ounce gloves. I can't even dream of that. They have courage that I will never have in my life. So I don't want to disrespect any fighter on the planet by saying that I could beat them. Wouldn't even allow myself to go there. Wouldn't even allow myself to dream that. Get whooped by all of them. So the answer is no fighter. Now, anyone, I would say probably Dylan Dennis. Yeah, I would say probably Dylan Dennis. All right. Thank you very much to everyone who wrote in, arielhelwani.substack.com. I appreciate all the love and support. I'm just kidding, Dylan. Calm down before you get all crazy over there on the social media. I mean, every post. Much love. Nursing the bum knee. Hope he gets well soon. We miss Dylan Dennis in the sport of MMA. And, I don't know if the ship sailed on the Jake Paul stuff. Would be fun. But we'll see how it all pans out. We're about to find out the next chapter in this whole thing on Sunday.